and like pretty clear right-wing alignment of basically any of the political figures if they had previously held office of some kind. And it did feel a little bit kind of partisan, and then sometimes it didn't. And I think that I don't think TLC is partisan, but I have sympathy for what you're saying, Jacob, that there might come time when things hit the fan enough where you need to pick a side and do something, and that will involve politics at some level. So
it's when the rubber hits the road and things become real that suddenly you get conflict and this effete spiritual Gnosticism, I have to say, of, oh, we're all going to talk about things at a spiritual level where nobody's ox gets gored and nothing real happens, it's just sitting around talking and yuck.
Well, honestly, Jacob, the issue is there's going to have to be a lot of talking because there has to be integration before you can act. Because you're having two sides of a coin who were at each other's throats just 20 years ago, now saying, "Oh my gosh, look what's going on." So what you're seeing is people who are realizing that there's a civilizational issue here and a sense-making issue. But I put on one of Paul Vanderklay's as a comment, and I actually meant this. The Rockefeller Republicans left the Republicans. They're with the Democrats now. Because as an old line Republican, Reagan Republican, the Rockefeller Republicans didn't believe in anything except money in their country club. Okay, and what they did is they moved over to the Democrats, who basically said, "Yeah, we'll give the lip service to certain things, but we'll protect your money." Okay, and actually, Eric Weinstein does a better job of describing it than I even describe it. But I saw it. Okay, and now what you're having is the Republican Party having what I call crazy time. They're trying to integrate people who never would have thought about becoming Republicans. You have the Democrats now having people in who their parents and grandparents were Rockford Republicans. Okay, I'm just giving a very, very top 30,000 foot. And now you have to have conversations. What does this integration look like as to what action will occur? And as we're in the midst of a civilizational sense-making crisis where basically everybody's looking at stuff and there's nothing you can believe on anything. Okay? I mean, I was at lunch with an old conservative said, I can't watch Fox. They're all bullshit. Right? I'm talking to liberals who say I can't watch. I had a client who's Jewish, who's a rock rib liberal from Highland Park, where Sam knows what that means, saying, I'm done with my party. They're giving me BS. Okay? What happens when you lose your religion? First, there's anger, there's bitterness, there's hurt, right? Anybody who's deconstructed out of a religion, usually, I mean, when Trinity closed, I sent out a thing to my classmates, and people who graduated 40 years ago are still pissed off at Trinity College. And all I said finally was, Trinity wasn't great, but get over it.
Okay.
Okay. Do you understand what I'm saying? I mean, the people get bitter and angry.
Okay.
Right. So I'm done.
But I did,
All right,
I
go ahead,
did catch
Chris.
a lot of it. I did catch a lot of it. As relates to the TLC and Peugeot, I think I see TLC as a flotilla of channels, and I think both Peugeot and Pvk are admirals of their own flotillas at this point. But what Hank highlighted might cue into the evolution of what the TLC is, because those deconstructing from the woke religion are going through deconstruction, and we're well versed in what it's like to deconstruct from your faith around the TLC. So the nature of and function of the TLC is probably going to remain that, like a place where deconstructing people like wash up on the shore and figure out where they're going to go from there. And
Yeah, I was
can
gonna say,
see with regard to the arc, like I said, I think it's fascinating. Like if you look from a 30,000 foot view at what Peterson was, and he was someone who sold Bibles to the atheists, and now we got Aha coming in as doing the same, and they're trying to get them on the ark, and they're leaning into that symbolism and metaphor as if they have a symbolic wizard on staff. It's sort of interesting, but what just the fear is that they're just Hegelian dialectic for the WEF. They're like, there's no other forum for rich people to come collude and network and wield their power, and they needed an alternative to what that other bald guy the WEF was selling.
Klaus.
yeah,
Meanwhile, they also see that like Barack's success with Netflix and how it's been so normalized. It's like it's a specific. The people who own Netflix is not what's considered. There's lots of Republicans with Netflix subscriptions, and so that needs an alternative. Now also, sorry, one more.
Yep.
One more. The emergence of the alternative media such as Rumble and TikTok, which is not at all addressed. I think we at the TLC level of things are more best suited to fight the information war at the line of TikTok and the other platforms than the ARC people. But
I think things will get interesting when Jonathan Peugeot calls out one of the elephants in the room, and I would imagine, Jacob, there are a lot of people talking about a lot of specific political things at that conference. If you go back and watch Schellenberger and many of those other people, you can see a lot of that. Hank is right in that the sense making, a lot of people are still in the sense making process, and you're not going to get specific until you do that sense making. You sort of have a degree of orientation. I think with respect to the TLC, Jonathan Peugeot is kind of a revelation there. And I think a lot of the people, when Jonathan Peugeot got up and talked, all of us knew that because we had seen lots of that before. But for a lot of people, they're like, huh? We thought we were going to talk about oil and nuclear and political stuff, and he's talking Plato. I think the real question that I have from Aaron's prompt here is what happens when all of those people at those other levels discover us? And because we've sort of had our own nice little corner where we can do our little nerdy sense-making things. And what happens when someone comes in and says, I want to give PVK a big salary so he can bring our audience into our movement that we'd like to weaponize towards a certain end?
How aware is ARC of us, Paul?
They brought me there.
I mean, the thing that unites ARC is fear. Everyone there is there because they're afraid of something's happening and they don't know what to do about it, and they need a place to talk about it. So expecting something to happen after this first one, I don't really think is a realistic expectation. This is the initial contact. Everyone is introduced to each other essentially, and what will happen over the next year before the next arc or whenever that is the thing that'll happen. And by the time there's a second arc and people have reformed these groups and reshared ideas, that's when I think you'll start to see this interplay of actually trying to do things. But right now, this is just everyone terrified and trying to, exchange language.
I think the biggest thing that was accomplished was Paul Vanderklay finally understood he was sitting around the big boys table.
Sitting around what, sir? Please say again.
The big boys table.
Kale, what do you got?
I think I agree. I think I agree with Jacob.
So, Paul, I have a question. So, all of the other speeches that were there, I think you mentioned like some of the political speeches, and I think Fox News was like brought up. Was it like one-on-one with Fox News, or do you feel that maybe the emergence of the conference created some kind of spark that showed some kind of promise in their speeches that maybe isn't there in the ordinary Fox News watching, or was it just the same, and was it just Peugeot who was different? I'm just curious what the whole spirit of our conference was.
I think I think the political speeches landed like a lead balloon. And I think the reason was what Jordan Peterson said in 2017 about lying preachers. The politicians are being exposed as liars. They are saying things that are designed to create a following, and they are not speaking what they actually believe. And people get a sense of that. And so I thought the much more interesting places of the conference were people who, like Jonathan Peugeot. I mean, Jonathan was clear there at the ARC stage. It was harder to understand Jonathan there for that those 12,000 people. But on the stage at the 1,500, Peugeot was crystal clear, and I think a lot of people were like, "Oh," and so. But there's a lot of elephants in that room. You know, you had the Weinsteins were kind of, you know, what Rafe said, which was very interesting, was, you know, he'd like a conference where the Weinsteins are on stage. The Weinsteins are not on stage because I think, and that goes back to Sam's point, that we're still in the sense making phase, and you have to do sense making before you proceed to application. And this is also an attempt to have a coalition. And so, you know, you get a whole bunch of dogs together and they're all sniffing each other. And there's a lot of that going on there too. Because there are a lot of people in the room that usually aren't in rooms together, myself included. I go into a room like that and it's like, these aren't my people. And a lot of the Peugeot artists are like, these aren't my people. But
yeah, I'd be really surprised if those political figures come back to the next one.
Yeah, but so
it's the other way around. The political figures are definitely going to be there.
See, GBTV was there. That's sort of Britain's Fox News. They're having a lot of drama right now. But also, some friends of mine were there. They were running the video work for the political and media people. Australia was so much more interested in that conference than anyone else, which was super interesting. More than Canada, more than the United States. It was a little bit on the radar for Britain, but Australia was feeling it.
I need kale in my life right now. Right now, I need some kale. We brought things to the table. All I've gotten out of him was, yeah, Paul is a big dog. What do you make of everything we've put on the table, Kale? Give me some.
Well, you ever seen the movie Clue? Sort of, I kept waiting for there to be some sort of announcement. Now that I have you all here, you know, but I don't know. It felt kind of duddish from afar. You know, I don't know. I don't know. Sorry, Graham, I'm not on today.
I don't know if you can get a sense of the place from watching the videos, because the videos frame it in a certain way. And what I'm trying to give you is a sense of, now I can't escape seeing it from my own eyes within the room, which is why I'm going to be doing these conversations with people who are in the room. But different, wherever you came to that room from, where. So example, I ran into, you know who Billboard Chris is?
Yes.
Yeah.
Billboard Chris goes around. Children cannot, you know, he goes around and gets in, just wears the sandwich board, and people come up to him and attack him. He's on Twitter a lot. And then the woman who founded Moms for Freedom in America, she was there. You know what that organization is?
Yep.
The anti-trans thing. Trans
Yeah.
kids.
So they were hanging out. Billboard Chris and they were hanging out. And so, you know, they sit down at a table with me, and it's like, how do I explain to you what I do? So I usually give it what you get real good at your 3-minute elevator pitch for estuary. And, but you know, I think there are a lot of people who are looking at this little corner and thinking, what? But then once they get it, then it's like, can I use that? It was like on a
I mean,
Dominican Beach
how
once.
do you tell those people that their world's about to end?
Well, that's what Eric Weinstein is for, because that's all he did was walk around and saying he should have had a sandwich board saying the end is near. That's what Eric
Right.
Weinstein was doing.
But that's exactly the guy that if I went there, I would want to hear speak
Right.
and have interaction. I'm going to tell you something. The most boring Peterson is when he's interviewing politicians. Okay, can I tell you, I am completely and utterly bored. Okay, look, I know what trouble was when I was a politician because I was all over the place because I'm sort of like this guy that likes philosophy and other things. So my philosophy, my thing is, I'm not on your team. I'm not on your team. You think I'm on your team, I'm not on your team. And I think that the problem is that politicians get so much into talking points that you cannot have any in-depth conversation. And so what it is it's one-dimensional. And if you think about politicians wanting two things and you watch that, you'll be fine. They want power and they want money. And if you follow those two things, you know what? Most of what they do does not surprise. Now, the problem is because of the power and the money, you now have a West that's basically completely disrupted. Okay? And so if Jordan Peterson will have Mike Lee on, or he'll have this guy on, and this guy on. It's like, I don't want to watch. It's like, because it's, excuse my language, it's the same bullshit I've heard for 40 years.
Politicians are to be expected to do politician things. What
Right.
I think is more important is this Kuiper quote: "There is not a square inch in the whole world, whole of creation, over which Christ, who is sovereign over all, does not cry, 'Mine.' There is not a square inch in the whole domain of our human existence over which Christ, who is sovereign over all, does not cry, 'Mine.'" This wasn't some rabbi. This was a Calvinist by the name of Abraham Kuyper, whose name I only know because of some Dutch pastor who wastes my time talking about all kinds of weird things other than the gospel.
Jacob,
what?
you
Wait,
show
wait,
your
wait.
love in such beautiful ways. I just want to.
Yes. And as sovereign over everything, we are dang fortunate. His commandment is to love each other. Speaking of which, Dolly, why don't you segue to wash some of Mr. Fats out of our brain, please? But you got to
muted,
unmute.
Dolly. Poor
What?
Dolly.
Could you
Put us
repeat
quick on
that?
this.
Just say something
Say,
like
but
you normally say. So
I like listening. Okay, I'm gonna throw something in here. Okay. I don't know why Luke Thompson comes to mind right now and Mosaic Vision. I think it's like, I don't know why. I don't know if you guys have heard about that. Well, currently it's come to the forefront of my mind. That's what I'm throwing in there. Go, just have fun.
Luke Thompson would be all upset right now. He
Yeah.
would come in here and he would
Where
say,
is Luke, by
kind
the
of
way?
things
Does he even
Luke-
watch these ones?
I don't know if he's watching this. He's probably got something to do. He hasn't showed up in the chat. So, I want to point something out here. Emily says this: I finally thought of a question, but it's too late. Not really. Which is, which song from Les Miserables did Jordan Peterson introduce? It was the French Revolution song. Now, the strangest thing was that the two major musical numbers that they had were one from Hamilton, the American Revolution, and the other from the French Revolution. And it's like, and this gets back to some of what Hank was saying, that Peterson sometimes is like, with all of this, quote Abraham Kuyper, the name of Abraham Kuyper's anti-revolution party. You know what revolution Abraham Kuyper was against? The French Revolution. Dum dum dum. So
The secularity of the French Revolution was satanic, and the answer is God.
And the incredible thing was that Peterson at the end has this speech and then leads it up to, and of course now they can't play that on YouTube because of copyright and algo, but he leads it up to, and there's this song from the French Revolution. I'm sitting next to Nathan Jacobs looking at each other like, what the heck is going on here? This is the crescendo I thought we'd go with For All the Saints, or even that great Anglican hymn, Jerusalem, where you're going to build Jerusalem on England's green land. And they go to the French Revolution. And I thought, I don't understand why you're picking the music you're picking, because when ministers are used to sort of taking thinky-talky and music things to put next to each other, you kind of want them. I mean, Sam Tideman, if he was the worship leader at the Ark, would not have picked those songs.
Don't we generally consider the French Revolution to have been a bad thing, or at least not particularly great, and sort of an example of a woke revolution gone to its logical extreme?
Especially if you're in the process of reasserting civilizational Christianity. Go ahead, Eric.
Can I play devil's advocate just for a second?
Yes.
If they're trying to, the people there are not, I mean, the Christianity was the undertone. It wasn't the explicitness, but so they're secular people that are all coming together from different backgrounds who are all angry at the change in situation, and that is a rallying cry. It's a song of angry men, right? Isn't that one of the lines from the thing? So I feel like they're trying to, use music to rally all these angry people, these diverse angry people, into a singular direction. And this is the first arc, so they don't know the direction. So they're just trying to gather the crowd, and everyone communing in this emotion like a mob, but in a ordered and more loving way, which is what music is. And then, hopefully that spirit then moves us forward to wherever this anger that we're all feeling about the collapse of society leads us. My guess.
I would also
love that point. I love that point. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Aaron.
No, like, I'm also afraid a little bit of, like, let's say, another case of what happened a couple years ago when Jordan Peterson went like far more political in some ways, and for it, like when he had the whole Daily Wire thing, right? And that's when around the same time that people like David from Rebel Wisdom came out like very, like, it's not for that reason. This was like had been building up for a while, but it was like this moment, like, okay, we can't support this any longer, and we have to do sort of our own thing separate from this, and we're no longer covering Peterson stuff on the channel. We're going to focus on this, and I think it's a legitimate concern for people in this corner to be like, okay, all of us are doing this thing here together, and at some point, some of us are going to wonder, like, wait, is this, being used for perverse ulterior motives, like at some conference which is taking place, like maybe a couple times, like in a decade or something like that, and therefore, like, for a whole new movement. And then I'm afraid that we're gonna lose a whole another group of this little corner, that no longer wants to associate with us. So I'm curious, is that a threat? Do you look at that as a threat, or is that like, no, like it's too separate from it?
I think so. We're all focusing on Jordan Peterson. The other people to focus on is David and Philippa Stroud, who none of us know. David and Philippa Stroud are known entities in the UK. He is a Christian minister, and is a Christian minister running sort of a Calvinist network of churches. His wife, she has been a member of the House of Lords. She was canceled for writing some things a decade ago that people didn't think was sufficiently affirming of gay people. And these are, and so this reassertion of civilizational Christianity is deep in them. And if you listen to that Dave Rubin conversation with her that I played some of, this conference just sort of emerged. And then Paul Marshall, who gave one of the most interesting speeches there, which probably you haven't listened to, but you really should. He is also a backer. He's a very wealthy man. He owns Unheard. He's been buying up news media things. Yeah, that'll get Grizz's attention.
Who owns Unheard?
Paul Marshall. So it's super interesting because to pull off a conference like this has to be north of $100,000. So it's super interesting. So there are anxieties about, and I'm anxious. If I'm protective of anything, I'm protective of this little corner because I don't want someone weaponizing it in service of some political ambition. And because what
if you gave us more money, what would we even do with it?
Exactly,
Paul,
which is why I love it this way.
I know exactly what I do with it. What are you talking about?
It's hilarious to me that you said north of $100,000 because Chino cost north of $100,000.
Okay.
That cost north of $1 million.
Not in liquid cash, though.
Can I derail?
Liquid cash.
Let me steer
Learn
back.
to do actual economic thing. It's not just about the cash.
Okay,
Well,
Jonathan.
you're talking about in terms of attention and the value of people's time and stuff. I was saying not in terms of hard.
That's true too.
cash.
Oh yeah, it's enormous. But Jonathan wanted to get in here so badly, so he is in now.
Thank you very much. I joined at the start because I had to do some.
Oh, I can't hear you. Your sound isn't quite good.
Oh gosh, sorry.
Stay in front of your computer.
Forgive me. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah, I joined at the start. I had to do some bell ringing. I'm in the place of the world where I can do that. You mentioned Oxford earlier. I can't say that word legally because I'm a student in the other one at Cambridge. So on your point of on your point of you were talking about sort of the religious veneer, which of course is assumed in England, but obviously very suspicious in America because of course Christian nationalism and all those sort of things. But the problem is, if you want to revive English Christianity, conformity to it, you need that authenticity that you were talking about too, because when you go to chapel, you see the choir sort of crossing themselves. But do they actually believe it? They bow to the altar, but what it's just empty. So it's difficult if in the English context, definitely, because the congregation's dwindling, and in liturgical sort of traditional churches, the big ones are evangelical churches. I'm part of an evangelical church, but I guess I wanted to say that if a big movement like ARC or whatever, it has to be authentic. You can't just, it has to be believed. There has to be a vision that's believed, right? An end that's grasped. And I guess people are skeptical of that end of ARC, potentially.
I have a question for that guy since he's coming as a representative of that place over there. That place over there is supposedly ruled by a church that is headed by the king, and the king is deeply associated with the WEF, and the ARC is in direct opposition to that. Is there sufficient religious counterpoint offered by ARC to challenge the Anglican Church, or are they trying to subvert Anglicans into the ARC with their vague religiosity? And as somebody who lives under the rule of that king, how do those things affect you?
Well, we had a little bit of controversy, obviously, when the king was crowned in some place, right? Because we had to swear to the king, didn't we? And the king had to swear to God. And I guess how I see things is that the king is sort of a symbol. He has to live up to something that's higher than himself. And of course, controversies of the king's personal life is very present. You can pick holes in the man, but I think the point is you can't pick holes in the role, But on your point of the WEF and all that sort of stuff. Honestly, I don't know. I mean, ARC, I think, is trying to subvert the culture as it is. And in England, you can't separate sort of the Anglican veneer from the culture a lot of the time, because it very much is about love and tolerance, especially these days. We had a recent synodical decision where, same-sex relationships will be blessed, in the Anglican Church. That's just been passed. So it's like, there's Anglicans, it's a very broad church, as you were saying, Paul, earlier. But I'll stop talking now. Hopefully there's some sense there.
Ayan Hirsi Ali in her Unheard interview, basically towards the end of it says, what kind of Christian does she want to be? She wants to be like Queen Elizabeth II. It's very interesting. That's who she picked out. So, all right, folks are leaving, and I said I was going to close this at noon when Grim, asked me what time would we be done, and I've kept the students 15 minutes later.
Well, let me go once more, Paul.
Okay, go ahead, Grizz. You can go once more.
I want to bring to mind that it is called an ark, and the visualization we have of an ark is in a flood, and the flood of that the ark was extant in was of pro-Palestinian protesters in the streets. And as far as the Americans are concerned, NATO has been paying the migrants that are coming across the border. And Frank Herbert wrote about the Sardukar. And I'm concerned that in our insular thinky-talky bubble, there might be a tide that while we're focusing on the ark, we're missing the flood, that we're not yet familiar with the history of Mecca enough to aware that we're in. And God bless us, everyone. Bye, Paul. Thank you.
All right. Jacob, you want a last word?
Yes, this painting is by Karen Wong, and it's beautiful, and everybody should take a look at it.
It is beautiful. All right. Jonathan Wesley, Tayo wants to talk to you, so find Tayo.
Oh,
He wants to compare notes with you. So,
sure. Gosh,
Eric,
okay.
thank you for joining. Thank you all for joining. Probably a good time to land the plane here. And thanks for joining the live stream. And if you're watching this later and you weren't in the hive mind, leave a comment.